Okay, so the title of our webinar today is ChatGPT on a Leash, Navigating AI as a Learning Designer. Okay, so hello again. My name is Jesse Harrison. I'm your host for this webinar, but I also lead the corporate team here at eWorks. The corporate team is a team of instructional designers that specialize in creating bespoke learning content for our clients. And joining me today is Rachel Thorne. She's one of our instructional designers. And I'm going to say AI enthusiast, but I actually think she's a lot more than that, as you'll find out. She is our guide today. We'll look at various AI tools and tips and tricks. We'll address some of those fears that instructional designers have now that AI is here, and it's actually being used quite extensively, I would say, in learning design workflows. I'm looking forward to learning a few new things. So please, Rach, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. As Jesse said, I'm an instructional designer at eWorks and an AI enthusiast. I would say that's the limit of my capability at AI. I'm just an enthusiast. I'm not an expert. I love using it in my workflow, and I love learning about it. So I'm excited to share some things that I've learned with you today. So let's start with an introduction. So let's start with who this webinar is for and what we want you to take away from it. So Jesse, how experienced would you say you are using AI tools yourself?
Well, I dabble, maybe a bit more than dabble. I use it mostly for the research, and actually, I'd probably say mostly for getting a start on the work. I do have that blank page kind of thing where I kind of stare at it for a bit. That said, I'll still go back and I'll use it to refine content. I'll use it to do rewrites. I'll summarize things. But I feel like I could do more, really.
Yeah. So that's a great way to use it. Blank page syndrome. Every instructional designer, every writer knows about that. This webinar is meant to demystify AI for learning designers who want to get their feet wet, but may be a little confused or reluctant. So if you're already familiar with these tools like Jesse, we may be telling you things you already know, but we hope you get some new strategies or viewpoints while you're watching. And if you've never used these tools before, we may be saying some things that don't make sense yet. So if at any point in this webinar you have a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat. We'll try to answer some as we go, but most we'll save for the Q&A at the end. And what we want you to take away from this webinar is just that we as creators and instructional designers love to tap into this sense of play and possibility. So no matter your experience level or your enthusiasm for these tools, we hope it inspires you to try out something and have a play. So I'm just going to start with some vocabulary. The word AI is being used as shorthand for all sorts of things, including in this webinar. So let's start with a quick breakdown of what we're actually talking about. Now, again, I'm not an expert. I am an enthusiast. Please don't take this as gospel, but this is just the easiest way I've found to conceptualize some of these concepts that have a lot of acronyms and might be a bit confusing to sort of separate. So we'll start with artificial intelligence. It's just a catch-all word for the ability of computers to simulate human problem-solving abilities and intelligences. So it's basically artificial intelligence is anytime a computer simulates any human skill. However, you might hear people talking about our future machine overlords, or some sci-fi dystopia, or even instructional designers being really scared that they're going to be replaced. And that what people are generally talking about when they say things like that is what we call general artificial intelligence. General artificial intelligence is when AI functions without humans. It has the ability to self-teach, learn from experience, reason, grasp nuance, and even feel emotions. And general artificial intelligence is not here. It is a theoretical leap from where we're at right now, and it's many generations away. Right now, it's just a concept. It's not a reality.
Yeah, right. It's that classic Hollywood sci-fi trope. Skynet, yeah. Terminator, yeah, all that. Yeah, we're not there.
Yeah, the Cylons are not here yet.
Yeah.
Another term you might hear is large language model. So large language models are just giant sets of words embedded with algorithms that find patterns. So ChatGPT is a type of large language model, and it's the most common one we use right now. And that brings us to generative AI. Generative AI is what we have right now that we're talking about today. It's simply a type of artificial intelligence that generates content. In this case, it generates words and images. So ChatGPT is a large language model, and it's also a generative AI. It uses a large language model to generate content for us. So let's talk a bit about generative AI, which we're going to be focusing on today, and what it can and can't do. So it just is built to recognize and generate new patterns. It's why it's so good at human language, and because it's full of syntax and rules. And it's also how it replicates and generates patterns for us that we can understand, since we also know those rules. Generative AI cannot learn in real time. So the data sets in a large language model are static, which means they are trained once on one set of data. If they want to relaunch a new version, they need to have a new set of data that's retrained and then relaunched. So for example, ChatGPT 4.0 has a knowledge cutoff date of December 2023. That means that the information that was put into that large language model, which is usually trawled from the internet or other various written sources of information, it was all captured on December 2023. So if there is new knowledge from this year, from 2024, ChatGPT doesn't know it and hasn't learned it. It's not in its large language model. It also can't learn new information from, so some Gen AI tools can find links and search the web and read your documents. They can generate content based on what you feed it, but it's not learning or making new connections about what you've told it. This also means it won't duplicate something that you've fed it into someone else's account, because the large language model hasn't changed and the data inside it hasn't changed. It's still the same amount of data, it's still the same large language model.
Rach, yeah, I got a question actually, Rach. So look, the times I've used ChatGPT, our interactions, it felt like it did kind of learn from those interactions and provide, what I thought would be, or what I think is like a nuanced response, something with some depth to it. It actually sounds like that actually is not the case.
It's really good at mimicking nuance, intelligence, because its language is good at that. It can interact with what you've told it because it senses the patterns in what you've told it, and it senses the patterns that could respond to that. It's very sophisticated at making patterns, and it's very sophisticated at linking language to ideas, but it's not learning it. It doesn't know it. It doesn't have, it's not learning, it's just generating patterns, very sophisticated patterns.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. So now that we know what we're working with, let's look at 3 common Gen AI tools. So today we'll be talking about ChatGPT, Claude, and Firefly. All of these are free to sign up for, although the free versions may have limits on image generation and how many times you can use them per day. ChatGPT 4.0 is the most common Gen AI. This includes image making capabilities. If you don't want to pay for ChatGPT, you can use Microsoft's Copilot. It was trained with the same large language model. And as I understand it, the free version can do images. So if you're looking for something that's free that can do images, that Copilot you could try. Claude's another popular word generating option. It doesn't do images, but it has some strengths that ChatGPT doesn't. It's a great content generation tool, and I'll show you how I like to use it a bit later. And finally, we'll be talking about Adobe Firefly, which is a free image generator from Adobe. It's free for now. So yeah.
Okay, I've heard good things about Claude, actually. I haven't used it though, so it's looking forward to seeing that in action. Okay, well, before we get into all of that, there is a special guest I actually wanted to introduce.
Hey, a special guest.
Okay, I just want to introducing Chatty the puppy, and maybe future corporate team mascot. We'll talk about that. You may remember the title of this webinar was called ChatGPT on a Leash. Well, we've called it that for a reason. Look, it's not a perfect metaphor, but for purposes today, we'll be imagining generative AI as a cute little puppy named Chatty. And why a dog? Well, dogs can do lots of things. They can pull sleds, they can guide visually impaired, they can provide emotional support, entertainment, all that kind of stuff. Chatty can do a lot of things, but he can't replace a human. So you'll see him pop up all throughout the webinar. If you hear us talk about Chatty, we are probably talking about, or we were talking about generative AI. He's going to help us, talk about how to navigate AI as a learning designer. Think of him as your companion, but you're a team, and you need to work together. But first, let's hear from everyone in the audience. Well, now you know what generative AI is, if you haven't already. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Yay or nay? Please jump in the chat. Tell us, do you use generative AI? If you don't, why not? And if so, what do you use it for? Great. Look, we'll keep moving on. Keep them coming. We want to hear about those responses. So, and we'll get to questions later on as well. So, okay. So we feel a big part of navigating AI as a learning designer is addressing the fears that are out there. Rach, let's take us through those fears now.
Yep. So the biggest fear is that Gen AI will take our jobs. This is, a huge fear that we all have. But I just want you to look at Chatty. Like, look at him. Do you think he's going to take our, look at him trying so hard to type.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
No, he's not going to take our job.
No.
I don't believe generative AI will take our job even in the future. As we've said, other types of artificial intelligence are coming in the future, but probably not anytime soon. Also, despite the hype, generative AI may have reached its peak form. So for example, ChatGPT's current version is 4.0. Version 5.0, which has not been launched, will require 5 times the data that 4.0 does. And version 6.0 will require 5 times the data that did. So this is an exponential problem. We're already on version 4.0 running out of content to train Gen AI on. And essentially it's going to have to start eating itself. Like it will run out of data to train on. And finally, generative AI needs human input. I won't spend that long debunking this fear because I think this whole webinar will demonstrate that Gen AI needs instructional designers in order to function correctly, and that will help us do our jobs better.
Yeah. Look, I wasn't aware of just how much data you need to train the Chatty. And the fact that we're running pretty close, or we're almost running out or running close, and seeing a limit or a peak. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I think, what you're saying about AI eating itself, I think that's kind of important. I guess that also reinforces that we need people to provide fresh data, I guess. Otherwise, we're just doing the same stuff.
Yeah. And like it will change how we work, but it's the version of it that's here is likely at its peak at this point. So I think that's really something to take away from today. So now that we know a little bit of the vocabulary, we know a little bit about some of the tools. Do you want to start trying it out?
Yes, we do. Let's go.
Okay, so let's jump into some hands-on demos and I'm going to take over. So if you've already used these tools, this wheel, you can request the host to allow multiple sharing for this webinar. So you need to multiple share. Okay, can everyone see that? ChatGPT screen. So I'm just going to go through a few ways I like to use these tools. But I'll start just by really simple demos. But for this, I need some audience participation. So in the chat, please name your favorite vegetable and your favorite celebrity. And Jesse will pick the one he likes best. So yeah, I can't see the chat at this point. So I'm relying on Jesse to pick the very best one.
Oh, there's some interesting ones here. Snow Peas, Brad Pitt, Radish and Drake.
Oh my gosh.
Pumpkin Elmo.
Okay. So I heard Snow Peas and Brad Pitt.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that one.
Okay. So all you do is you type in plain English, please, and I always ask it please. I don't know why. It doesn't care. Please write me a limerick about Brad Pitt eating snow peas. And then it has a little think, and it comes up with a limerick, which was, there once was a star named Brad Pitt who fancied his snow peas quite a bit. In a film or a scene, he'd munch on them green and charm us with every small bit. That's actually one of the best I've seen.
That's good.
Yeah, it's got the right cadence. So that's how you use ChatGPT. You basically just ask it for something in plain English and it gives you something. The next one I'm going to show you is Adobe Firefly. Can you see this screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So it works the same. You do a prompt in plain English at the bottom of the screen and then it generates images. So I never asked this one, please. I don't know why. But I just say a picture of Brad Pitt eating snow peas. And then it thinks about it for a minute. Depending on what version you've got, it thinks about it less. Depending on how many people are using it, it thinks about it less. On the left side of the screen, you can change the format, the colors, and oh no, one or more words may not meet the user guidelines and were removed. So you can click here to learn more, but I've asked for a celebrity today because I know that Firefly does not generate images of celebrities, but I wanted to show you just a fun little workaround, which is that you go to ChatGPT, you ask it in 2 sentences, I didn't ask it please this time, or less, describe what Brad Pitt looks like. Okay, so it says he's a charismatic actor with chiseled features, blue eyes, and blonde hair. He often sports a rugged yet stylish look. So I go back to Adobe Firefly and I replace Brad Pitt with whatever ChatGPT has told me, and then I generate that. And we'll see how close it gets to Brad Pitt. Sometimes it gives me a monkey. You saw it give me a monkey earlier.
There's like Planet of the Apes.
Okay.
Oh, that's much better.
Yes. This is probably the closest we've ever gotten a celebrity so far. Yes, a chiseled man with blonde hair. So you can tweak this in many ways. You can make this look like Brad Pitt in so many different ways, just in plain English. The last one I'm going to show you is Claude. What I like to do with Claude, he can do all of the things that ChatGPT does. He can write limericks, he can write a whole bunch of stuff. But what I really like to do with Claude is to feed him pictures. So I'm going to download this handsome man. Load him into Claude, which has just a very simple setup. And then what I'm going to ask Claude is to please write me some WCAG AA 2.1 compliant alt text for this image. So I just cut and paste. I already have a prompt ready for that. And it gives me some compliant text. It knows WCAG. If it didn't know WCAG, you could feed it those compliance principles, and it would generate, less than 25 words, context, things like that. So this says close-up portrait of a young man with short blonde hair and bright blue eyes. It's great alt text. I love using Claude for this. It's really good at looking at pictures and interpreting them. It's also really good at transcribing. So you can write something out, scan it, and transcribe, and it's a little bit better than some of the other ones at figuring out what written text is supposed to be. So that's just a few of the ways I like to use the tools. We'll explore like a few different ways later in the webinar. And for now, I'll stop sharing and pass it back to Jesse.
That's a great one. I actually haven't thought of using it for that purpose. That's a really great tip.
Cool.
Okay.
So before we go on to the next sphere, you're going to get a copy of this webinar. So I won't spend much time on this, but there's just some basics of good prompts. Be specific, give context, give an example, ask for a format, ask for a tone. If you don't get what you need, ask for it. If you still don't get what you need, ask for it again. Sometimes I swear at it. That usually doesn't work. Don't be afraid to try something new and just keep iterating and practicing. Those are the prompt basics.
Cool. Okay, let's continue. We'll start looking at another fear we as learning designers have, and that is that generative AI is unreliable.
Yes. Yeah, this is huge. And now before we look into this, I'm going to tell you a little story, which is that I generated all of the images in this presentation using generative AI. And I would like you and everyone in the audience to look very closely at this picture and tell me if you can spot a problem.
I'm going to look as well. Yeah, usually you go straight to hands, hands, feet. They look pretty good, actually.
Mug has 2 handles. Oh my God, we didn't even notice that one. Gordon.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, missed that completely. Well, look, I'm thinking the obvious one here is the speech bubble. What is 2 plus 2?
I'm just blown away where the mug has two handles. Yeah, I tried 15 times to get this to generate the word IS in an image without that extra S, and it just would not do it. So I stopped, and then I realized that this illustrates my point, that Gen AI is unreliable. So yes, sometimes it makes up things that seem true. This is called hallucination. It's trained on human data, so misinformation accidentally gets in, nefariously gets in. It sees the world differently, so it's notoriously bad at generating images of words. It can be mad at math, which is weird. It's also famously bad at hands, which you mentioned. It's also apparently really bad at mugs. It doesn't understand, it only generates. So it wants to generate something, even if that something is not real or true. It wants to give you something.
Okay, look, understanding all that is, I mean, there's got to be something we can do about checking accuracy.
Yeah. So there's a million ways to check Chatty's accuracy. The first one is I just tell it not to lie. I tell it not to lie over and over again. I tell it in different ways. I'm like, please don't tell lies. Please tell the truth. Please use like all these things. Just tell it not to lie. Surprisingly effective. Use direct, unambiguous language. So avoid jargon. Don't use slang. Don't use ambiguous words, which could have multiple meanings. Always cross-check your answers. So you can do this via Google search. You can run the same prompt on Claude and ChatGPT and compare them and then cross-check. Remember, though, that spot checking is not enough. You really have to keep your eye on Chatty at all times. I mean, look at him just destroying this shoe that I could not properly get it to make. Even if something looks true, even if a web link looks legit, always check it. And then the fourth one is to change Chatty's perspective.
Yeah, I've heard about using or doing this. What do you mean by giving Chatty a perspective?
Yeah, so I'll take you through another hands-on for that. So what I mean by changing Chatty's perspective is that I'll literally say from the perspective of a doctor or from the perspective of a clown, tell me about this. And it'll, change its information based on what you've told it. So let's try this. I'm going to start a new chat window, which is just this button here. And I'm just going to say, from the perspective of a historian, how were the pyramids built? And we'll just see what it comes up with. So far, so good. Great. It's talking about the labor force. It's talking about tools and techniques, logistics, organization, engineering skills. This looks great, right? This seems like a good general primer.
At a glance, it looks great. Yeah.
At a glance, it looks great. I don't trust this. And also, I'm not quite sure how to check whether or not it's true, like, verified or whatever. So the other thing you can do is ask Chatty for two different perspectives or opinions. This is useful now because we know there's different things that about the pyramids that we might not know, or different opinions about how they were built. But it's also useful to ask, even if you don't know if there's two different opinions, like even for stuff like medical things, it's useful to ask Chatty if there's any differing opinions, to argue any sides. You'll often get illuminating content. But just be aware that if there isn't really a differing side, Chatty will sometimes make one up. So always be aware that it will make something up. So now I've said, make two historians take different perspectives or viewpoints on how the pyramids were built. This is key. What are some issues that historians do not agree about? So let's see what it says here. Great. So it's generated some text at the beginning that was like, this is how the pyramids were built. Everyone knows this. This is all true facts. And now it said, well, actually, there's two different viewpoints. And here's a list of ways that people disagree on how the pyramids were built. So already you're getting a little bit more specificity, a little bit more context, and a few more, facts to check and perspectives, basically. So, but we want to go even deeper than this. So the third way you can give it a role is through the back end. And you can do this with a free account. You just have to log in. So you go up to your little name there. You go to customize ChatGPT. And I call this a persona. Basically, this is what would you like ChatGPT to know about you, and how would you like ChatGPT to respond to you? So it's not called a persona here, but I like to think of it as a persona. I don't tell it about myself usually, I tell it about my audience. So if I'm writing about plumbers, I'll tell it I'm a plumber. And how I do that is, how I do that is I ask Chatty, what the qualities of a good plumber are, and then I paste them here. So since we're concerned about accuracy, I've asked ChatGPT the qualities of a good historian. So they've added things like objectivity, attention to detail, research skills, things like that. I'm going to take those and kind of paste them here. I'm a historian as far as ChatGPT knows. The next one is even more important. It's how you'd like Chatty to respond. So you can say anything here. You can say you like a friendly tone, you like being asked follow-up questions. You can say you prefer British spelling and vocabulary, you prefer Harvard citation styles. It basically just tells ChatGPT how to answer you, what language, sources of information, what tone and depth you like. Since we're shooting for accuracy, I've also got something pre-written. I've told Chatty to answer me with trusted and inclusive sources of information, and I've given it sources I trust. I've told it to cite primary sources. I've told it to spell out internet addresses in full, so I can see at a glance where the information is from. And most importantly, I've told it again and again in many different ways not to lie. I've said, do not make anything up, do not lie, and always use primary sources of research to make all of your arguments. So we will paste this in. To how we want ChatGPT to answer us. And we'll save this. And then we'll basically ask it the same question again and see what happens. So we'll say,
sorry, Rach, just while it's generating, I think we've got a pretty relevant question here, just from Bree in the chat. Just regarding that customization pop-up we just saw. Is that available in the free version, or because we are using ChatGPT 4 here?
Yeah, I believe it is available in the free version. I don't have the free version, so I haven't checked. But it's not available on the free launch screen, but it's available in the free version that you log into, as far as I know.
Oh, thank you, Laura, as well in the chat. She said yes, it is. Yeah. Thank you.
You just have to log in. So we're just having that in the back end now. We're just going to say, take two perspectives on the building of the pyramids, cite primary sources. I've said this in the back end, but I'll also say it here. Spell web addresses out in full. And let's see what it comes up with now. Great. Yes. It hasn't spelled the addresses out in full. It really doesn't like to do all the things that you say. This is why you have to tell it 3 or 4 times. But already it's telling you what the primary sources is. So the traditional viewpoint is that pyramids were built using large labor forces of skilled workers with simple but effective tools. Here's how they think that. There's hieroglyphic inscriptions. There's archaeologists' work. Here's the primary sources of that information. There's evidence of hydraulic engineering. Let's see, it hasn't spelled the links out, but we can follow them. So I'm telling it to spell out the entire web addresses of all your sources. Great. GizaPyramids.org, Egypt, Science Direct. These aren't great, but I can see at a glance that Cambridge.org is a good one. Things like that. The other thing you can do is, this isn't a very inclusive, perspective. You can ask it to find Egyptian sources of information, even if they're in Egyptian, and add them to the search. It will translate things from Egyptian into English and integrate them in, or if it already has Egyptian as part of its data set, it will just have them inside of it. So I think going into the back end and just tweaking it is a really amazing tool to help with the accuracy and just the depth of the research that you can get out of it. And this is one of my favorite ways to use it. So with that, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, question time again. So we've seen some useful advice there about how to check for accuracy. But please tell us about your experiences. What kind of methods have you heard of or used to check the reliability of your generative AI results?
And I noticed that Fiona, oh, Gina is saying that it's still a bit unreliable. And honestly, yes, like just checking is the only thing you can really do. It's still unreliable. We'll still make things up. Fiona's asking, is it possible to customize per chat? Yes. Oh, that's what Gina is responding to. Yes, there's a little toggle enable for new chats. And I think that you can enable different ones for different AQF levels.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, so coming towards the end of things, we'll move on to another important topic, and it's something that maybe isn't talked about as much as those other points as we've addressed, but it's absolutely something we think is important to discuss and be aware of. The fact that AI is biased.
Yeah. So Gordon, you read our minds. AI is biased. Look at him. He just wants to eat out of that little blue bowl, and there's all these other bowls that he could eat out of, but he's just ignoring those ones. Is Chatty biased? Yes, he is. Bias is everywhere. It's not just in generative AI. Gen AI was trained on human data, and humans have a tendency to bias. It reflects our bias back to us because it's built on our writing and images. Common biases are built into the data. So these are the defaults that society often uses and that surround us every day. And Gen AI also has some weird bias built in. So I'll give you a story to illustrate this. Amazon noticed that their hiring algorithm was picking up more men than women. They couldn't figure out why. This tool had been vetted by 1 million people. It'd been run through every checker in the world, and it was still picking up more men. And they figured out that it favored 2 words, which were executed and captured. So when it went through resumes, it would pick out resumes more often that used the word executed or captured. And they figured out that men just use those words more than women. This is the kind of bias that is in the algorithms, it's in the training data, it's in our own heads. We can't know it until we investigate. All the makers of these tools are currently investigating, trying to make these models better, but I don't trust that either. So the best tools are on the next screen. Just educate yourself about bias everywhere, not just in Gen AI. As instructional designers, part of our job is to make learning for everyone. So we should investigate these biases in ourselves. Interrogate Gen AI bias, like ask it why it won't make something or why it has made a certain choice. Every question you ask Chatty gives you insight into how it sort of sees the world. And then tell it what inclusivity looks like. So ask it for representations of gender, ask it for representations of ability. However, if you do this, it can often lead to stereotypical material. So be aware for that as well. Yeah. Those are my best tips.
So those tips, or to me, those tips reinforce the fact that there's still a need for us, still a need for humans, learning designers, to be working with Chatty every step of the way, really. And also just to educate ourselves and feeding that back in to Chatty, just so he can give us those best responses.
Yeah.
Still a lot of work involved here.
Absolutely. And so just to leave you with something fun, I think Gordon mentioned Gemini earlier. So Google launched Gemini. It had an AI overview. When you did a search on Google, it prioritized results from their AI algorithm. But unfortunately, this algorithm was trained on some faulty data. And if you've ever visited Reddit, you know what kind of data it got inside of it. So you get questions and answers like, hey Google, how many rocks can you eat? And Google will say, well, according to geologists at UC Berkeley, you should eat at least 1 rock a day. Hey Google, how do you thicken pizza sauce? Well, you can add about 1/8, no more than 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to your pizza sauce to make it more sticky. So this is hilarious, and it's based on just people joking around on Reddit, but AI doesn't know the difference, and it could also be really dangerous. Google launched this even knowing this, and so I think that reinforces, just like you were saying, the fact that Gen AI needs humans.
That one, the parrot.
Oh yeah.
Parrots can do a variety of jobs. First of all, prison inmate, I'm not sure if that's a job, but yeah, architect, housekeeper, great.
And as Jesse knows this, but some of these that you'll see on the internet aren't true. People will make these up too. These ones are all verified. as searches that actually happened. So, and answers that people actually made.
Well, I definitely need more rocks in my diet, so it seems.
According to geologists, we're not getting enough rocks in our diet.
Okay, so we're pretty much at the end here. Thank you for everyone. Look, I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I hope you've learned some new tips and tricks on how to incorporate AI into your workflow. Look, I just want to give Rachel a big thank you. Great explanations, useful, practical demos, good stuff of how we can work best with AI as learning designers, as well as some awareness, gaining awareness around the fears and concerns around it. Look, so to conclude, as we've seen, you need to work with AI to get the best results, really, and you need to train your chatty. It's evident that AI is going to have a big, huge impact on our industry, and looking back in history, things like this have happened before. Printing presses, cars, trains, internet, email, the list goes on. I think what to remember is chatty is powerful, but as we've seen, he really isn't going to replace us anytime soon. He needs guidance because he can be unreliable, and he has some biases we've just seen. I think we all want learning content, quality learning content, and that still needs us at the core to ensure that happens. There's not a one-click, one-button solution that's just going to solve all our problems. Thing is, though, Chatty's going to help. And he wants to, but realistically, we need to remember that we're in the driver's seat, not AI. You've seen the way Chatty thinks. Do you think he could drive your car for you? Would you be in that passenger seat? Probably not.
He's so cute. Look at him trying.
Yeah, it would be cute. Look, we're still going to be designing and developing learning content. We just now have that help. I think one of the best aspects of bringing AI into your workflow is the fact that you can choose the level that you wish to engage with it, and you get value at any one of those levels, really. Look, one of those best examples I thought was that alt text example. That was really great. The fact that it can give you that WCAG compliant response is pretty great.
Yeah,
that'll save you time, even if you are really just using it for that. So look, there's so much more than that. And we encourage you, and we're hoping the point is just to explore and find out for yourself, keep practicing. So adopt a chatty if you haven't already, and start training, because they won't train themselves and they need you to do that for them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and listening. There's some tools and references in this PowerPoint that you can use later. And then I don't know if we have time for questions, Jesse. We're at time.
Look, if everyone wants to hang around for a bit, sure. I think we can probably do another 5 minutes. We can just go through the chat and see what we have
absolutely,
here.
If you have to go, thank you very much for coming. Yeah, I'm really glad you came, and I hope you learned something new to play around with.
We are recording this, so this will be available to watch later on, and we are going to send out these slides to everyone too. So let's have a look. And please, new questions, let me know. Let me know.
Somebody mentioned copyright, and there was a great link. I might add that into there's a copyright. Ilona, who I think had to leave, put it in about artificial intelligence copyright. It's still being worked out. We had a section of this webinar about the ethicality of ChatGPT and these tools. They use a lot of fossil fuels. They're murky copyright, murky ways they're being made and distributed, and murky things they're being put into, but there's really not a lot of good answers for that yet. So we didn't feel we had enough information to present yet. Watch this space, it's still ongoing. I think that's a great link that Ilona put into the chat.
We did have a question from Tim in here. He was asking, are there any kinds of images, and this relates back to our alt text example, any kinds of images you find that alt text does not work well with?
Yeah, that's a great question. We could try one out. Did Tim ask that question? In what ones do you have problems writing alt text for? Because that might be the same kinds of ones that Claude might have a problem with as well, like maybe abstract concepts, mathematical diagrams. Yeah, things that are quite technical to describe. Alt text is an art, not a science. And yeah, there's also a lot of good alt text tools and image reader tools out there that people are making and that are also available. So if you have low vision or vision impairment, you can use these specialized tools to search images in more detail. So maybe I'll link some of those in the PowerPoint as well.
There is a few actually have just popped up now. Tim actually just clarified maths and graphs, kind of
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's difficult to describe just generally
Yeah.
in alt text. Let's see, Evelyn, that was a very informative presentation. Rachel, can you give us an example of a prompt telling generative AI what inclusivity looks like?
Yeah. For this, I would be very careful with how I talk about it. And I would normally, I don't have one ready, but I have a lot of inclusive language guides, which for various different kinds of inclusivity. So I would start there with the language that those guides use, the language that humans use to be inclusive. I would load those into either the backend or give them as documents and say everything that you respond, please use this as a guide. Just a good inclusive language guides, but I'm not really the expert in that, and I rely on other people to sort of very rigorously talk about inclusive language. You can teach it to do that. I just, off the top of my head, couldn't tell you a couple sentences. It would have to be like a couple documents that you load in or paragraphs that you load in. You can actually be like, if it generates an image, it'll often just generate an image of a man. So you can just be like, I would rather this be a woman, stuff like that. Just iterate the inclusivity you want to see. Just tell it to do it.
Another quick one was a list of tools does not have Gemini. Do we not recommend it?
I've never used it. And I think Gemini is the one that was generating the AI overviews, which were telling you to eat rocks.
It was.
I've also heard that they haven't changed that. They haven't taken those Reddit posts out of the model. So I'm not sure how it's not prioritizing them. They must have changed the algorithm somehow. But I've just never used it. I would love to try it out.
It's definitely mentioned in the same sort of sentence as some of the others, at least as a new up and coming one. Yeah, I mean, look, the best thing is just to jump in there and have a play. Nothing saying you can't cross-reference what you see in ChatGPT with what you see in Gemini or Claude. That's in fact probably a good way of testing out its abilities.
I'm excited to have a play around with it.
There's one here. How do we feel about auto creating AI-based full courses?
I really hope that this whole webinar has told you why that's a bad idea. It's not capable of doing that yet. It just really, even if you could auto-generate a whole course, you would have to fact check it at the end, make sure that everything's true. Yeah, you would be needed for so many things as a human at the end of it to verify and assess it. It can give you the syntax and the language and generate a whole bunch of text, but that doesn't mean it can, teach a course or even write a textbook.
Okay, maybe we'll leave it there. Actually, look, if there is any follow-up questions, please let us know. There's I'll just bring up our slide here. Look, this address you'll be getting correspondence from us, and you've got our email address here. Let us know. Send us a question. Maybe there's something we can help with. There was just some housekeeping before we do go. There is a post-webinar survey we'd like you to grab. If so, I'll just grab that address and put that in the chat. Okay, there it is. So thank you, everyone. We might just leave it there. Hope you enjoyed. Please drop us a line, and I hope you got some tips and tricks and some actionable items for you to try.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.